Spider-Man, No Way Home understands everything I adore about the Spider-Man character. It is, in every way, a celebration of what makes Spider-Man such a popular character to so many people. This film perfectly showcases Spider-Man's greatest superpower, and that is Peter Parker's ability to endure great suffering, but despite how hard it gets, keep going and keep being a hero. That ultimately is what heroism is. It's rising above the adversities of life, being willing to put others' needs before your own, and genuinely caring about others and doing the very best that one can to give something back to the world. Spider-Man is the epitome of this idea. Conventionally, this is showcased with the death of Uncle Ben as part of the origin story of the Spider-Man character. This traumatic event sets Peter Parker up to become a hero through Peter finally understanding the meaning of Ben's iconic statement of with great power comes great responsibility. Uncle Ben's death is directly a result of Peter's inaction. Peter has the opportunity to stop a robber from escaping in front of him, but chooses not to act despite his great power. This leads to Ben's death as the robber shoots Ben later on during his escape. And through this, Peter learns that inaction, despite his great power, leads to consequences for others. And in this case, the consequences for Peter's inaction are incredibly close to home. From this, Peter learns the hard way the importance of giving a damn and being a good person, and learning how to use his great power for good. So, usually, the biggest defining trauma event of Peter Parker's life happens early on in his story. But what No Way Home does, in an attempt to keep things fresh, original, and interesting, is recontextualize Spider Man's biggest trauma event as being later on in his character arc. One could even argue that Tom Holland's Spider-Man isn't really the true Spider-Man up until the point of May's death, because within his time on screen, he had yet to overcome adversity on such a close-to-home scale. Even the death of Tony Stark pales in comparison to the impact the death of May has on him, with the reason being that Tony's death isn't Peter's fault. He mourns for Tony as a lost father figure, but Tony sacrificed himself on his own accord, whereas May's death in No Way Home is a result of Peter's actions. Only in this version of events, the tragedy is enhanced, because May's death isn't a result of Peter's inaction, but instead a result of Peter's action to do good. The plot of No Way Home is built around the notion of Peter trying to return the villains from across the multiverse back to their respective multiverses after Peter had accidentally brought them here with the help of Doctor Strange in an attempt to get everyone to forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Peter's good nature is showcased through his desire to help the villains before sending them back, so that they have a shot at redemption rather than just dying upon their return to their original multiverses, as the plot reveals that they were brought into the main Marvel Cinematic Universe moments before their demise in other universes, where the previous iterations of Spider-Man films took place. The movie deals with the concept of with great power comes great responsibility on a number of scales. At the start of the movie, Peter utilizes his connections to Doctor Strange, a form of his power, if you will, to benefit both himself and the people that he cares about. He has Strange meddle with magic to get everyone to forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Peter's repeated interruptions during the spell, in an attempt to remove certain people from being under it, showcases that at the start of the film, unknowingly, Peter isn't ready to give up the people that he cares about to save them, but it does showcase Peter's desire to protect the people that he cares about. All of this build up of Peter's goodwill in this movie alone means that when the plot throws this back in his face through Norman Osborn's murder of Aunt May, we feel the weight of the tragedy because we, the audience, have seen the extensive efforts of Peter to do good. We understand his struggle, his pain, and I'm sure to some degree or another, every audience member understands that. We've all done our best to do acts of good and have had it thrown back in our faces at some point in our lives on a much more dramatic scale, as movie stories, especially superhero stories, should be. To me, a superhero movie is a hyperbolized version of life. mean that they should be grander, greater, and more legendary than what reality is. Some would argue that that makes a story unrealistic, but to that I would say that realism isn't necessarily the point of a superhero story, but relatability to the hero is. I always see the concept of the superhero plot being broken down into two distinct parts. The first is more surface level, and that's the super. It's the spectacle of the film, where the character does the impossible through their powers. But the second is the key to telling a truly great superhero story, and that's the hero part. This is the part that makes a superhero both relatable but also inspiring. I'd argue that this has been the key to the success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Characters like Spider Man, Iron Man, Thor, the Guardians of the Galaxy are all flawed, and those flaws make them human. But their lives are also filled with pain, but they keep going despite the adversity that they face. And this is the quality that's so inspiring and what makes them so heroic. Peter's dedication to finish what he started, and I must note, still not give up on saving the villains despite the fact that they are responsible for May's death, showcases the admirability of the Spider Man character. And the plot's use of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire's Spider Man only enhances this quality and brings out the best in Tom's iteration of the character. The film's climax brings these ideas together very neatly. After returning all the villains from across the multiverse back to their homes, as the multiverse begins to crack and fall apart, Peter realizes that in order to fix the mess he's created, he has to make a great sacrifice. Having realized his great power, he now has to use it responsibly. When Strange cast the spell at the start of the film, the only mistake Peter made was that he wanted the people he cared about to remember he's Spider Man so that he can continue to live a double life and have them in it. And at the start of the movie, Peter isn't prepared to give that up. Doctor Strange even foreshadows this when he states that the problem is you, trying to live two different lives, and the longer you do that, the more dangerous it becomes, believe me. As mentioned earlier, even though Peter at the beginning of the film is ready to help, he's not willing to help at the expense of his own happiness, which is why he wants the people he cares about to remember he's Spider Man. By the end of the movie, Peter's solution to fix the damage to the multiverse he's caused is to give up his two different lives, and he gives up the one full of love, friendship, and happiness. He gives up the better half of his life to keep being the hero, thus using his great power responsibly. I would argue the sacrifice Peter makes at the end of this movie is more heroic than traditional sacrifice, because Peter gives up his life but doesn't die. Instead, he has to live on, knowing that everyone who ever loved and cared for him will never remember him ever again. This decision is reinforced in Peter's final interaction with Ned and MJ, following Strange's new spell being cast. The scene is set up perfectly. It begins with Peter preparing to tell MJ about everything that had happened, but as he enters the very cafe where at the start of the film the three of them found out about their rejection from MIT, he overhears MJ and Ned discussing their placements at MIT, which they now have because they're no longer associated with Spider Man, which clearly affects Peter's upcoming decision, as showcased in Tom Holland's excellent performance. And then, just as he's about to tell MJ the truth, she brushes her hair out of her face and he sees the bandage from where she was hurt during the final battle. This, for me, is the moment where Peter realizes that in telling her the truth, all he'll do is hurt her or anybody else that he cares about again. He doesn't want Aunt May's scenario to repeat itself. He doesn't want to lose anyone else because of him. So what does he do? He walks out, leaving them in the ignorance of the truth, knowing that it will spare them pain, despite the pain that it causes him. The film ends with a heroic yet somber final swing of Spider Man on his way to save people. He has truly lost everything, and yet he continues the good fight because he is a hero. He's inspiring because of that. He faced dramatic examples of adversity and yet rose above them and endured. In the paraphrased words of Gwen Stacy from The Amazing Spider Man 2, Peter became greater than what he suffered. That to me is what makes Spider Man so popular. The fact that he is genuinely good despite what he faces in life. It's a quality that's beyond admirable, and this film truly understands the burden placed upon Peter for having great responsibility as a result of his great power. So, my take on Spider Man No Way Home is that it is, in every way, excellent and perfect celebration of the Spider Man character through the film's profound ability to understand and showcase what it is that makes Spider Man the beloved hero that he is. Thank you for listening.